Before I became a grandfather, I spent 28 years as a federal prosecutor. I have stood in courtrooms across 4 states, cross-examined murderers without blinking, and dismantled lies so carefully constructed they fooled entire juries. My son forgot all of that. He forgot who I was before I became the man who shows up at Thanksgiving with pie and fixes the leaky faucet in his guest bathroom. He forgot, and that was the biggest mistake he ever made in his life. My name does not matter. What matters is that I have a granddaughter named Sophie. She is 9 years old. She has dark brown eyes that catch light the way still water does, and she laughs with her whole body, arms and shoulders and everything. Like laughing is something worth committing to entirely. My son and his wife adopted her 4 years ago from the foster care system. She had been through 3 placements before she came to them. 3 families who decided she was not quite what they were looking for. When my son called to tell me they were bringing her home, I cried in my car for 20 minutes before I drove to meet her. I told myself those were tears of joy. I believed that completely. For a long time, my son also has a biological son from before his marriage, a boy named Marcus, who is 12. Marcus is a good kid, quiet, a little awkward, loves building things with his hands. His mother and my son share custody, and Marcus spends most school weeks with his mother and weekends with my son and his wife. I love Marcus the way I love all my grandchildren, without condition and without rank. But my daughter-in-law has always had a ranking system. I noticed it in small ways at first. The way she talked about Marcus differently than she talked about Sophie. The way she praised Marcus's drawing but simply said nothing when Sophie showed her a painting she had worked on for 3 days. The way food was served at dinner, Marcus's plate first, then my son's, then hers, then Sophie's. Always last, always after a beat of hesitation, like Sophie was an afterthought the kitchen had not fully planned for. I told myself I was imagining it. Prosecutors are trained to find patterns. Sometimes that is a curse. Last spring, my son called to tell me he had booked a trip to Walt Disney World in Orlando. 10 days. The deluxe resort package, the kind with character dining and private park access, and a concierge who arranges everything so you never wait in a single line. I asked him how much something like that costs. He said, casually, the way people say things they want you to think are normal, that it came out to around $18,000. I said nothing for a moment. I asked when they were leaving. He gave me the dates. Then I asked a question I thought was obvious. I asked if Sophie was excited. There was a pause on the phone that I have replayed in my mind many times since. He said Sophie was not going. I asked him to repeat that. He said the trip was for Marcus. Marcus had wanted to go to Disney World for 2 years and had been through a difficult adjustment at his mother's new house, and they felt this was a way to do something special for him. Just the 3 of them. Him, his wife, and Marcus. I asked him where Sophie would be. He said his wife's cousin lived 40 minutes away and had agreed to have Sophie stay there for the 10 days. I knew the cousin. I had met her twice at family functions. She was a woman in her mid-40s who worked double shifts and smoked on her back porch, and had made clear on both occasions that she found children to be, in her words, a lot. I asked my son if Sophie knew about the trip yet. He said they were planning to tell her that weekend. I told my son that what he was describing sounded like a serious mistake. I chose that word carefully. I have learned over decades that calling something a mistake gives a person an exit. It gives them a way to correct course without having to admit they are cruel. I offered him the exit. He did not take it. He told me that parenting decisions were between him and his wife and that he hoped I would respect that. He used the phrase that people use when they have already made up their minds and are not asking for input. He told me Sophie would be fine. He said she was resilient. I have heard that word used to describe children who are suffering more times than I can count. Resilient. As though a child's ability to endure pain is a character asset rather than a consequence of having no other option. I told him I would be thinking about it. I hung up and sat in my study for a long time. 2 weeks later, my son's family left for Orlando on a Thursday morning. Sophie had been taken to the cousin's house the night before. My son texted me a photo from the airport. He and his wife and Marcus in matching mouse ear hats, grinning, rolling suitcases behind them. The caption said, "Vacation mode." I looked at that photo for a long time, Then I put my phone down and went to make coffee. The call came at 11:47 that same night. I was still awake. Old men and prosecutors share the same curse, which is that the mind does not stop reviewing the day's evidence just because the sun went down. My phone lit up with a number I recognized as the cousin's house phone. I answered immediately. It was Sophie. She was not crying yet when she started talking, but she was very close to it. The way a voice gets thin and careful right before it breaks. She said she did not want to be a bother. She said she knew it was late. She said she was sorry for calling. I told her to stop apologizing and talk to me. She told me that the cousin had gone to bed at 10 and that the house was very dark and that she could hear sounds outside she did not recognize and that she was in a bedroom that smelled strange and that she had forgotten to pack her inhaler. Sophie has mild asthma, nothing severe, but she needs her rescue inhaler available, particularly at night. She asked me if I thought she would be okay without it. I asked her if she had told the cousin about the inhaler. She said she had mentioned it when she arrived and the cousin had said it was probably at home and that Sophie was probably fine. Probably fine. A 9-year-old child with asthma, in an unfamiliar house, without her medication, in the dark, and the response was probably fine. I told Sophie to stay on the phone with me. I told her to turn on every light in her room. I told her to get a glass of water and sit on the bed. I talked to her about nothing important for 20 minutes, the way you talk to someone who needs to hear a voice more than they need information, until her breathing steadied, and she said she thought she could sleep. I told her I loved her. I told her I would see her very soon. I waited until I heard her settle. Then I sat in my kitchen and thought for approximately 4 minutes. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my neighbor, a retired pediatric nurse who has been my friend for 11 years, to ask her to come stay at my house and monitor things while I was gone. The second was to the airline. There was a 6:15 flight from my airport to Orlando International the following morning. I booked a seat. Then I booked a hotel near the resort. Then I opened my laptop and began making a list. I have spent almost 3 decades preparing cases. I know what evidence looks like, and I know what the absence of evidence looks like, and I know which one is more dangerous. I spent the rest of that night doing what I have always done when something important needed to be handled correctly. I prepared. I pulled Sophie's adoption paperwork, which I had kept a copy of since the day it was finalized because I am a man who keeps copies of important documents. I pulled her medical records that listed the asthma diagnosis and the prescribed medications. I pulled the texts from my son over the past 8 months that I had never deleted, because old prosecutors never delete anything. I went through them slowly, pulling the ones that showed a pattern. My son telling me Sophie was adjusting when I asked how she was doing at school. My son telling me not to make it complicated when I brought up her last birthday celebration being significantly smaller than Marcus's. My daughter-in-law's message from Christmas, which I had also saved, where she referred to Sophie in a way I had found troubling enough to keep. By 4 in the morning, I had a folder, a real one, printed, organized with tabs the way I used to prepare for trial. I landed in Orlando at 8:30 in the morning. I took a car to the resort. It is a beautiful property, the kind of place designed to make you feel like the whole world has been softened and brightened and arranged for your specific comfort. Families moved through the lobby with strollers and sunscreen, and that particular vacation energy that is almost aggressive in its happiness. I checked in under my name at the same resort where my son was staying. I had looked up the reservation in the family account my son had added me to 2 years ago during a holiday trip, a small administrative detail he had forgotten about when he stopped including Sophie and things. I knew which building they were in. I knew the park schedule printed on the resort app. I did not rush. I have never once in my professional life rushed to a confrontation. Rushing is for people who are not sure they are right. I was sure. I called my son's cell phone at 10:15 that morning while he was, according to the app, at the Magic Kingdom. He answered on the 3rd ring, surprised. He said my name with the particular intonation that means both hello and why are you calling me right now. I said I was in the lobby of his resort. The silence that followed was very long. He said that was not possible. I said I had just had a very good cup of coffee in the lobby restaurant and could confirm that it was, in fact, quite possible. He told me to stay there. His voice had changed completely. Whatever vacation softness had been in it was gone. I waited at a table near the lobby fountain. I had ordered another coffee. I had my folder on the table in front of me. A family passed by with a little girl about Sophie's age wearing princess ears and dragging a stuffed elephant, and I looked at her for a moment, and then I looked back at my coffee. My son arrived 20 minutes later with his wife. Marcus was not with them. They had apparently left him at the pool with another family they had met at the resort, which told me they expected this conversation to take some time. They were correct. They sat down across from me. My daughter-in-law had her arms crossed before she was fully seated. My son was doing the thing he has done since he was 17 years old, which is composing his expression into something that is meant to look calm, but is actually just the face of someone who has not decided yet which argument to use. I let them speak first. This is a technique I learned in my first year as a prosecutor. People who are defensive will always over-explain if you let them. Over-explanation is a gift. My son said he did not appreciate being followed. I said I had not followed anyone. I had flown to Orlando and checked into the same hotel where my grandchildren's reservation was made, which any grandparent with access to a shared family account might reasonably do. He started to respond to that. I held up one hand, and he stopped. Some habits from the courtroom are impossible to shake. I asked my daughter-in-law a direct question. I asked her when she had last contacted the cousin to check on Sophie. She said she had texted that morning. I asked her to show me the text. She hesitated. Then she showed me her phone. The text was sent at 9:52 a.m. It said, "How is she?" The cousin had replied, "Fine." That was the entire exchange. I nodded. Then I opened my folder. I have learned over many years that a physical folder on a table changes a conversation more than any words can. People look at a folder and they understand, at a cellular level, that the person across from them has been preparing while they were not. The folder says, "I have been thinking about this longer than you have." The folder says, "I am not here because I am emotional. I am here because I am ready." I told them, without raising my voice, what Sophie had told me the night before. The dark house, the unfamiliar smells, the sounds outside, the inhaler she did not have. I told them the time of the call. I told them what she had said before I let her go, the part where she apologized for being a bother, which she said in a way that told me she had been taught to believe that her needs were a burden. My daughter-in-law said that children have anxiety and that Sophie was prone to it, and that this was not the same as neglect. I told her she was correct, that this single incident was not legal neglect by itself. Then I turned to the page in my folder where I had printed the definition of child neglect under Florida state statute, along with the section that describes a pattern of differential treatment between children in the same household. I slid it across the table. She did not look at it. My son did. I watched him read it. I watched his face do something complicated. I told them that I was not there to threaten them. I was there because I loved Sophie, and I loved my son, and I was not willing to watch something preventable become something permanent. I told my son that the boy he had grown up with would not recognize the decision he had made this week. I did not say it to hurt him. I said it because it was true, and because true things, said plainly and without theater, have a way of landing that nothing else does. My daughter-in-law told me I was overreacting. She said Sophie was with family. She said the trip had been planned for Marcus specifically. She said I had no right to come here and turn a family vacation into a courthouse proceeding. I agreed with her that I had no legal right to interfere with their parenting. I told her the folder was not about legal rights. I told her the folder was about what I was going to do with its contents after this conversation, which depended entirely on how this conversation ended. My son asked me what I meant by that. I told him I had documented enough over the past 18 months to submit a report to Child Protective Services that would, at minimum, open an investigation. I told him I did not want to do that. I told him I had come here personally, at significant inconvenience and expense, specifically because I did not want to do that. I told him there was another option, and it was simple. My daughter-in-law said I was bluffing. My son looked at his wife and then looked at me, and he said, very quietly, that he did not think I was bluffing. He knows me. He has known me his entire life. He knows that I do not threaten things I am not prepared to follow through on. She uncrossed her arms. The other option I offered them was this. Sophie would be brought to Orlando. Today, I would personally drive to the cousin's house, collect Sophie and her belongings, including her inhaler, and bring her to this resort. The remaining 6 days of the trip would include all 3 children, the character dining reservations, the park access, the pool afternoons, all of it. If that happened, the folder stayed in my briefcase. If it did not happen, I would be making a phone call from the parking lot. My son asked me what I would do if they refused and took Sophie home early to avoid the issue. I told him the folder did not require Sophie to be present to be submitted. Nobody spoke for about 30 seconds. A family with twin toddlers walked through the lobby behind us, both kids in tiny Mickey Mouse shirts, laughing at something only they understood. My son said he needed a minute to talk to his wife. I said I would be at the same table. They walked to the other side of the lobby. I finished my coffee. I watched them without watching them, the way you observe witnesses from across a courtroom, aware of posture and gesture, without making it obvious that you are reading everything. My daughter-in-law was doing most of the talking. My son was listening. At one point he turned and looked at me, and I held his gaze, and he looked away first. They came back. My son sat down. He looked tired in a way that was not about sleep. He looked like a man who had just seen something clearly that he had been choosing not to see for a while, and the clarity was not comfortable. He said, "Okay," just that word, "okay." But I have heard that word said in many ways, and I knew what this version meant. This one meant he was done defending the thing he had been defending. I drove to the cousin's house that afternoon. It took just under an hour with light traffic. The cousin answered the door in scrubs, about to leave for a shift. Sophie was inside in a back bedroom watching something on a tablet. When I appeared in the doorway, she looked up and then she did something that I was not fully prepared for, which is that she did not scream or run or do anything dramatic. She just said, "Papa," very quietly, like she had been wondering if I would come and had been trying not to hope too hard. I packed her bag while she got dressed. The inhaler was on the kitchen counter, exactly where someone had left it. I packed it first. We stopped at a drugstore on the way back so she could pick out something for the drive. She spent 4 minutes evaluating gummy options with the gravity of someone making a very important decision and then chose a bag she immediately offered to share with me, which is the kind of thing this child does. When we pulled into the resort, Sophie pressed her face to the car window and looked at the building. I had not told her exactly where we were going, only that she was coming with me and we were going somewhere fun. She saw the resort sign, and then she turned to look at me with an expression I cannot fully describe. It had surprise in it, and something else. Something more careful, like she was not entirely sure she was allowed to be happy yet. I told her she was absolutely allowed to be happy. I told her she was staying for the rest of the trip. She hugged me in the parking lot for a long time. She smells like the lavender shampoo she uses, and something indefinably her, the particular warmth of a small person who has decided to trust you completely. My son met us at the entrance to the resort. He crouched down to Sophie's level, and he said he was sorry she had not been here from the beginning. He said it plainly, without qualifications, which is the only way an apology means anything. Sophie looked at him for a moment, and then she nodded in the solemn way she has, like she is filing the information appropriately. Then Marcus appeared behind my son. He had apparently heard we were coming. He looked at Sophie and said, "I saved you a spot at the thing with the characters at dinner. I told them there would be 4 kids. Sophie blinked at him. Then she smiled, the full-body kind. And that was that. I stayed for 3 days. My daughter-in-law and I did not have many conversations, but the ones we had were civil and specific. She took Sophie to a princess experience at the resort spa on the second morning. Just the 2 of them. I do not know what was said. I do not need to know. What I saw when they came back was Sophie wearing a small plastic tiara and my daughter-in-law carrying her bag for her, and that was enough information for now. Before I flew home, I sat with my son on the balcony of the resort room while the kids were at the pool with his wife. We watched the sun go sideways across the palm trees, and my son held his coffee with both hands and did not say anything for a while. He asked me if I had really been ready to make the call, to submit the report. I told him yes. He was quiet again. Then he said he had not seen it from outside himself until I showed it to him. He said that scared him. Not what I had done, but what he had not noticed himself doing. The way something had shifted in his house without him watching the shift happen. I told him, That was the thing about these situations. They do not arrive as a dramatic choice. They arrive as 100 small accommodations, each one reasonable enough on its own, until you look up one day and a child is in a dark house 40 minutes away while her family is buying mouse ear hats. He nodded. I told him that he was not a bad man. I have known bad men. He is not one. But being a good man does not run on autopilot. You have to keep deciding to be it. Every week, in every specific situation, you have to decide again. He said he understood. I believe he did. I have interviewed enough people to know the difference between understanding and performing understanding. What I saw on that balcony was the real thing. 6 weeks after I came home from Orlando, I had both my grandchildren at my house for a weekend. Marcus was building a model plane at the kitchen table. Sophie was helping me make my mother's biscuit recipe, the one that requires exactly the right amount of folding and absolutely no overmixing, which Sophie takes extremely seriously. She had flour on her nose and was explaining to me with great authority that the dough was not ready yet. I told her she was the expert. She considered this and nodded and went back to folding. My phone buzzed. It was my son. He had signed them both up for a summer program at the art center downtown, a 6-week thing with painting and ceramics and printmaking. He said Sophie had seen a flyer for it and asked if she could go, and so Marcus was going too because it seemed like something they could do together. He wanted to know if I could do pickup on Tuesdays, since it ended at 5:30 and traffic was rough for him those days. I said yes, without hesitating. Sophie did not look up from the dough. She had no idea that text had happened. She does not know the full shape of what took place in Orlando, only that Papa came to get her and brought her somewhere wonderful. That is enough for her to know right now. Children should not have to understand the mechanics of the protection they receive. They should simply receive it. But I know. I know what it cost. The flight, the folder, the conversation on that lobby couch, the look on my son's face when he finally heard what I was saying. I know what it would have cost to do nothing. I spent 28 years understanding that the worst outcomes are never the dramatic ones. The worst outcomes are the ones that happen slowly, in small rooms, without anyone choosing to intervene. Sophie pressed her thumb into the dough and looked up at me. "Papa," she said, "I think it's ready." I looked at the dough. I told her she was absolutely right. We put it in the oven together and stood at the counter waiting for the timer. And outside the kitchen window, the afternoon light was doing that particular thing it does in late spring, going gold and long across the yard, the kind of light that makes everything look like it has been there forever and always will be. I put my arm around her shoulders and she leaned into my side, and we waited for the biscuits to rise.